Welcome back, everyone. Glad you all are here. Today we're going to be testing, reviewing, and providing some feedback on products sent in by Sean with Caravan candles. You guys know I love to do these videos. You seem to all really enjoy them as well because it's a chance for all of us to, see what everyone else is working on and maybe learn from each other, tips and tricks, get a perspective on different materials used. We're all part of the same community, so it's really nice to kind of help each other out and just kind of grow together. So thank you all for being here. If this is the first time you've seen one of these review videos, real quick synopsis of how it works. I spend the first part of this video unboxing it, checking out the presentation, and making some speculative guesses on the materials being used, maybe the wax, maybe the wicks. We talk about the jars and the cold throw. I try to, make some stabs at the fragrance, just whatever comes to me as we're checking out the candles. I'll try to provide some feedback and some tips and tricks along the way if anything does apply or something I have experience with. And then the second part of this video will be after I've had a chance to test the candles, and then we will talk about those test results all right here within the same video. And we'll talk about wicking, we'll talk about hot throw, and again, any feedback I might have. I do say this all the time, but just to remind everyone, while I've been doing this for a long time and feel like I'm well versed on a lot of different materials, I'm not an expert in everything. So this is just my personal experience and my personal feedback. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but hopefully you guys enjoy these videos and take something from them. And of course, thank you all for supporting the channel. All right, let's go ahead and dig into today's products. So I'm gonna go ahead and get everything out of the box. First thing I'm gonna say is everything is packed very nicely. All the products are in their own box. And then they were all packed nicely into a box full of packing peanuts. So 0 issues with packaging and shipping concerns. Great job. Now, before we talk about the products themselves, we're going to talk about some of the materials that came along with it. First thing first here, and I don't like to spend too much time on these because many of you already have businesses going and you're just looking for some additional feedback, and others of you are just starting out and you're looking for feedback to get going, to really help you in the testing process and make your first sellable candles, and you're not at this point yet. So don't feel bad if you are not at a stage where you have presentation materials and boxes and labels and packaging. It isn't necessary. We're all at different levels of our candle making career, so to speak. So you guys can send whatever you want when you're ready for some feedback. That does not have to be on par with anyone else, and we're all at different stages. So I just want to reiterate that. But that being said, he did send a candle care card, which is pretty standard. It's the type of the information you would see on a warning label. Let's see. Candle fact sheet. Here are some basic questions to ask yourself while you review. The answers are on the back. No cheating. All right, I like it. So we're going to ask these questions. I'm not going to open this because, well, that would be no fun. Number 1, what type of wax do I use? Well, we're hopefully going to find out. What type of wicks do I use? What scent is your favorite? I'll try to guess on the back. All right, cool. This was a good one. Again, if you haven't seen these before, I like to make some guesses, and at the end of the video, you guys correct me and let me know if I was right or way off. I've been both on this channel. But what I like about this one is he also threw a curveball, and he made a guess, and we're gonna find out what his guess was about my favorite scent of the ones he sent. That was a lot of the word scent. So we're just going to set this aside, and you're just gonna have to take my word for it. I'm just gonna set it aside. That's just a packing slip. And then one other thing here that just says weight on it. I'm not gonna read this one out loud here on the camera. It's more of a kind of a personal thank you that Sean sent, and it's a handwritten note. So let's go ahead and dive into the products. All right, there are 4 candles here. Let me get them in view. So I'm certainly gonna test all 4, and we will take a quick look at all 4. But because of the number of them, and we don't want this video to be an hour long, I'm assuming the labels are gonna be pretty similar on one. So we're gonna talk about the look of one of them and then quickly talk about the fragrance and some other things about the rest. And then when I do actually test the candles, if the test results are fairly similar too, I'm not gonna dissect each one of them. But if there are major differences between a couple of them, of course, I will certainly point those out as well. These look like, I don't know, 3.5 by 3.5 by 4 inch boxes, something in that range. And then of course it is customized with his label. Now this first one I grabbed is called Field of Provence. So we're gonna start with that one. All right, excellent packaging so far, excellent. We have a nice little info card right on the top, which tells you a little bit about the fragrance, the notes itself. This is lavender, eucalyptus, and sandalwood. And then it gives you a little bit of a story on each one of these. So that's pretty cool. I'm not gonna read each one, but that's a nice little touch. I really enjoy that. It might be the first time I've seen that, actually. Kind of a story about why they use this scent. So inside the box is, of course, the candle. Shocking. And then surrounded by that is a little bit of crinkle cut. So plenty of packaging. We've got candle, crinkle cut, box, packing peanuts, and a larger box for shipping. So excellent job. Definitely no problems here. Nice snug fit. Excellent work. All right, let's go ahead and pop this out. Basically a 9-ounce straight-sided jar, similar to jars that I also have in one of my collections. A slightly different lid and rim though. So I have a twist top. This is more of a, well, this is a twist, sort of twist threaded top too. This is a non-customary type of lid. So he has to use special lids to make sure that it fits the thread on this jar. I have some amber jars that use the same type of thread. It says lavender, eucalyptus, and sandalwood. It smells a lot like lavender and eucalyptus. I don't smell as much sandalwood, but it is really common to have that lavender mixed together. Maybe that's why I'm not picking up on it distinctly by itself because I'm so used to the two being together. But I definitely pick up the eucalyptus and lavender. Maybe the eucalyptus more than anything, which is unusual. Normally lavender is overpowering. All right, let's talk about the label here. I love the colored border to match the fragrance. I'm assuming we're gonna have something different on each one of these. Let me show this camera a view of it too. There we go. This is a soy blend candle with a net weight of 7 ounces, which is about right. Again, this is a 9-ounce jar, but it holds about 7 ounces worth of wax. So that's what you put as a net weight on the candle. Like I said, I use jars that are very, very similar to these, the exact same size, in fact. So you got the company name at the top. I love your logo. That's really neat. It's got a mountains in the background, and then, well, if there's something else here that shows the logo a little bit better, maybe this little cutout here. Caravan candle with mountains and a RV. So that's pretty cool. Let's talk about the wax here. Okay, this is definitely heavier in paraffin, I believe, than it is soy. If I had to guess a common Parasoy blend, I would probably guess 6006, but it could certainly just be a custom blend. Maybe his mixture of soy, like a 464, mixed with a paraffin, like a 4630, for example. That would be another guess, but assuming, that is probably starting with some kind of pre-blended wax that's already out there on the market, that's pretty common, I would go with 6006 if I had to take a guess. It's a fairly safe guess, but that's what I would go with. The other reason I would assume it's mostly a paraffin or a Parasoy is because it says soy blend on the candle. If it was all soy or all coconut soy or something like that, it would say a natural blend or 100% soy or a cocoa soy, something like that. Generally, when you see soy blend or Parasoy, well, especially a Parasoy, but generally if you see soy blend, it probably means something like a 6006, so a paraffin and a soy mixture, which again, nothing wrong with that, very, very common wax. And there's a tiny bit of sinkage around the wick, which is very common with a lot of waxes, but definitely ones that have a little bit of a paraffin in them as well, because they do kind of shrink a little bit more. So yeah, that would be my guess on the wick, or I'm sorry, on the wax. Also, the color of the wax, they did not use any dye, so this is the natural color. And the color of this wax reminds me a lot of a 6006 wax as well. Now, a lot of waxes look the same, so that could just be some confirmation bias there that I'm just trying to convince myself that's what it is. But again, it is kind of what it looks like to me. It also feels like that to me. Let's talk about the wick here. So I don't know how well the camera will pick this up, but I'm gonna try to look at the wick here. And it is a flat braid cotton wick for sure. And then it has paper threads, which usually means one of 4 wicks: HTP, a CD, a CDN, or an Eco. Well, I know it's not an Eco. Ecos are a little bit thicker than this, and the threads are a little bit further apart. So that leaves HTP, CD, or CDN. Now you don't see CDN used very often, mostly in coconut blends, so definitely not very often in 6006. A lot of people use CD wicks. I use a couple CD wicks in some of my 6006 candles, but mostly HTP. And because of the way the threads are and just the, there's a very small difference between a CD and HTP just looking at it. But if I had to take a guess at this, I'd go with an HTP. So if this is an HTP, the wick size I would guess is somewhere between a 73, 83, or 93. This is definitely not a 93 just because of the size, which makes it probably 73 or 83. If it's a CD wick, I've used 6 up to 9 on a 6006, so probably a 7 or an 8. That would be my best guess. However, we don't know if they're going to use all the same wicks in all of these jars, or if there's some differences. So in my case, depending on the fragrance oil, I might use a different wick. So I might change my mind. I reserve the right to change my mind. So we'll go ahead and set this aside for now. All right, this one is Sunflower, Linen, and Citrus. Oh, great name. Sunflower Sundress. So that's a really, first of all, great combination of fragrance oils and a great name for it. Love the look of this one. The yellow is perfect. I love the picture you have in the middle. Okay, interesting. So this has a little bit of that clean cotton, fresh linen type of fragrance, that kind of outdoor cottony one, right? It smells like laundry or laundry sheet, dryer sheet, something like that. But you can definitely pick up a little bit more floral in this one, which I'm assuming is the sunflower. So I like this one the best out of the two so far. But more importantly, we've got a change of a wick here. This is definitely different. So I know I said this before. I don't know if the camera is going to pick it up, but it is slightly different. I'm going to bring both of these in here a little bit. These definitely are different wicks. Not just different sizes, but God, they seem like a little bit different wicks. I told you CD and HDP is kind of hard to tell apart, which is true. Usually, in my opinion, the CDs look almost a little darker, just a tad darker, and maybe it's the paper threads being tightened in a little bit more. Maybe it's the threads are a little bit closer together, but I'm pretty sure I need to change my thoughts on this a little bit. This one definitely, the second one, the sunflower one, definitely seems like an HDP wick to me. Definitely. Now I'm rethinking the lavender one, and I either think it's either a smaller HDP than I thought, or I need to change to a CD, maybe even a CDN. I don't know. But though I feel like they're different wicks. And before we move on to the next two, let me talk about something else with 6006 that everyone usually mentions or talks about, and that is the jar adhesion. Not a super big deal, especially to customers, but I know as candle makers, sometimes we overly care about that. So let's talk about that a little bit. I've done plenty of 6006 reviews on the channel before. Sometimes your candles will look like this, if the camera will show it, where there's a few wet spots here and there. And then others, you won't see any jar adhesion at all. Like it's not perfectly smooth up against the jar, but there's no wet spots. That's because the entire jar is a wet spot. If a wet spot is an unfamiliar term to you, it just means an area where the wax pulled away from the jar, the side of the jar, and it looks like it's wet. It's really just air in between. Very, very common. Anyways, this jar doesn't have any of that, and that's because all of the wax pulled away together perfectly, and none of it, I mean, there's a fraction of space around the entire candle in the jar. Not enough to make it like come out or anything like that. It's just a tiny bit of a fraction of a space. And that actually gives the candle a very uniform look. So in my opinion, there's kind of two things you're going for with jar adhesion. Either you want all of the candle surrounding the wall of the jar, so perfect jar adhesion, which is really only possible with really low melt point soft waxes like soys and coconut soy waxes. And then you have the opposite, where you have candles that pull away completely. Those are also great, and a lot of your parasoys will do that. The ones that tend to cause people fits are the ones that are kind of somewhere in the middle. They either, like parts of the jar are perfect jar adhesion, other parts are pulling away, and that makes the candle look a little uneven, and that's the ones that start driving people nuts. So my suggestion is, if you're using 6006 or other waxes, is not to try to get perfect jar adhesion. In fact, pour the candle and let the candle cool so it can all contracts just a little bit, and you get this perfect uniform withdrawal around the jar, and it looks great. It looks great. Hopefully that makes sense. It's really kind of hard to explain that concept a little bit. All right, let's move on to Sardinia Suntan. Definitely a lot of these outdoorsy fragrances, which makes sense. It's Caravan candle. It's about traveling. It showed the mountains and outdoors. This is seagrass, eucalyptus, and coconut. Interesting. Not a huge fan of eating coconut, but I like the smell of it a lot. So it must be this combination of the seagrass and coconut that I'm really digging. So far, definitely my favorite. Each candle's getting a little bit better. This wick looks like a hybrid of the previous two. Sean, you're really like screwing with me here. These could all be the same, or I might have none of them right. I don't know. We will find out. All right, next one is Toscana, All of You. Toscana, I Love You. That's okay. Creative name. Let's see if we can get that in there. I like it. I like that name. Okay, I love the color green. Not that that's relevant, but I love the picture. It's an olive leaf. So this one is bergamot, olive leaf, and jasmine. I love all three of those fragrances. Bergamot is one of my favorite fragrances in the world, and I love Earl Grey tea. If anyone else drinks that, that's made with bergamot. So olive leaf, oh yeah. And then jasmine. I use some jasmine, a couple different jasmine fragrance oils. So here we go. That is good. I might change my opinion after I burn these, but just straight out of the jar, my two favorite are Toscana, All of You, and Sardinia Suntan. By the way, the more we've progressed and messed with these candles and looked at them more and more and more, looking around the top of the wax, feeling the wax, I'm 100% sold now. That's a 6006. Also, I can see where on a few of these he filled in a little bit with the heat gun. Pretty normal, very normal. I'm not criticizing that. I just mention it because sometimes when you do that, you can see a little bit of the swirl left over in the center where that happened. Sometimes it's because of how the wax re-dried in the middle. Plus you get a little bit of the wax coating from the wick into that layer of wax. You can see a little bit of that on the top. A lot of waxes can do that, but I've seen it so much with 6006 that I'm gonna go with that wax, 100%. Anyways, back to the fragrance. Oh, one other quick thing here. He added a couple little samples here. These are pretty neat. Tiny little like lip balm cases, I think. Just a tiny bit of wax so you could just get a whiff. You don't actually use it. On the bottom, he has a little sticker with the name of the fragrance. Cool. It's just like a little dab, a little blot, little daub of wax. I don't know what you want to call it. It almost looks like chapstick. That'd be my only concern, is like it's like a lip balm. It does have a warning not to use it, but holy cow, it looks like a lip balm. It feels like a lip balm. That would be my only apprehension to doing it this way, because I would have swore it was a lip balm. Okay, so let's talk about everything real quick and summarize my guesses before we move on. First of all, great presentation, great packaging, great consistency on your theme here. Getting a niche and a theme and you're sticking with it, that will help you. Definitely help you take off early on when you have that focus, because you can get a target market a lot easier than someone trying to do kind of general mass appeal. You're doing a great job, many of you are, with defining your niche, defining your focus. Everything is consistent. Let's talk real quick about my guesses here. First thing you want to know is, what wax do I use? I'm sticking with my guns on this one. I'm going with 100% IGI 6006, which is a parasoy, 70% paraffin, 30% soy. That would be my guess on the wax. What type of wicks do I use? I still think we're using two different wicks here. I think we've got 1 or 2 CD wicks and then 2 or 3 HTP wicks here. The HTP wicks, I'm gonna say, are somewhere in the 73 to 93 range, probably an 83, 73 or 83. And the CD wicks could be anything from a CD6 all the way up to a CD9, or maybe even a 10. So I'd somewhere in the middle. That's just a best guess. But I'm having a hard time figuring out which one is in which candle. A couple of them definitely look different to me. It's a little bit tough to tell. And then the last thing was, what scent is my favorite? And he's going to try to guess on the back of this. So my favorite's either that bergamot olive leaf one or the seagrass and coconut. I got to make a final decision here. So if I had to pick, I would go with the bergamot, olive leaf, and jasmine. Toscana, I love you, all of you. I'll go with number 1, and then second choice would be seagrass, eucalyptus, and coconut. All right, thanks for tuning in so far. Give me just a second. I'll be right back, and we'll talk about my results after I've tested these and let you know some additional feedback. And then we'll check my guesses. Definitely don't want to miss that. So stick around so we can check my guesses. All right, I'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Well, actually, I guess you guys never left. It was me that left. So hello, everyone. I am back. Right, well, this is a treat. These were 4 great candles. All the fragrances were really nice. We're going to talk about each one of them one at a time, and then really kind of overall, just some comments about all the candles in general. So let's go ahead and start with Fields of Provence. That was the lavender, eucalyptus, and sandalwood fragrance. As I mentioned, I didn't smell much sandalwood out of the jar, and I really didn't smell much of it burning either, so it's probably there, just real subtle hints of it. I mostly smelled a fairly good mix of eucalyptus and lavender. Out of the 4, it ended up being my least favorite of the fragrances, not because I didn't like it, just because I'm fairly used to a fragrance like that, and the other 3 were a little bit different, a little bit more unique for me. Plus, I just really liked the other 3 better. I mean, it's just a personal preference. As far as the way it burned, the hot throw wasn't as strong as a lot of lavenders that I'm used to, but I think it's because of eucalyptus. Eucalyptus is not always the strongest when it comes to hot throw, and so that could have been kind of pulling it down just a little bit and maybe made that fragrance suffer. Well, suffering, that's kind of a strong word. The suffering. It held it back a little bit in terms of hot throw, but it was still fine. Really no complaints about it at all, and the way it was wicked and burned was excellent. No issues with the burning at all. I'm going to talk about the wicking as a whole at the very end here, because they all burned very, very similarly. There's only maybe one that was kind of slightly different than the other, but they were all really consistent in the way they burned. So definitely some good testing, and you definitely have consistent performing candles. The footage that I'm showing is really only showing the first burn or two, just because honestly, taking the footage every single time gets a little redundant. So I really just like to show a little bit of the footage so you know what candle I'm talking about and you can get a little bit of a glimpse of it. But it works a little bit better for me to explain how it went. The first burn on this particular candle, and we'll get into more details on this in a minute. Well, you know what? Actually, let's save that to the end because, like I said, they were all had a very consistent theme in the way that they burned and the wicking. So let's hold on to that. The next candle up was Sunflower Sundress. Now, this was definitely the most subtle of the hot throws. So this had the weakest hot throw. Not that it was poor, just it was less than the other three. But I did enjoy the fragrance. I like the fragrance of sunflower. It also had a little bit of that linen and citrus in it as well. I mostly smelled linen and sunflower, and I thought it smelled really good. I actually had this burning in a bathroom and then in a bedroom, a little bit in the kitchen. And so it was a really pleasant smell. It just wasn't as strong as the others, but it burned excellently as well. The next one up was Sardinia Suntan. This was the one to me that it definitely had some grass and eucalyptus, kind of that outdoorsy sun type fragrance. In fact, I smelled a little bit of like a suntan lotion. So whatever they use in that lotion is very similar to this, in my opinion. It was pretty good. However, this was much better smelling than like a regular suntan lotion. I really enjoyed this one. This was one of my top two favorite fragrances of the bunch. It also had an extremely good hot throw. No matter where I had this one burning, it was throwing well everywhere. And then finally we had Toscana Olive You, which is the Toscana I Love You Olive whatever, bergamot, olive leaf, and jasmine. This did end up being probably my favorite fragrance. Between this and Sardinia Suntan, it was really close. I really enjoyed this one. It wasn't as strong as a hot thrower as the Sardinia Suntan was, but it was still good. And I really just enjoyed the fragrance. I love the olive leaf and the bergamot and the jasmine. Great combination, great fragrance. If I had to pick one myself, I'd probably go that direction because I'm partial to those notes, but man, it's a toss-up. They were all really, really good. Okay, so the one thing I want to address before we get to the envelope fact-checking me on my guesses is the wicking in general. So you saw a little bit of the footage of each one of these burning, but I want to talk about them all together in the way that they were wicked and how they perform, because this is really important, especially for any of you that have used 6006. Almost everyone, when they start using IGI 6006, which again, I'm pretty sure that's what this wax is. If I'm wrong and the envelope tells me I'm wrong, well then take what I said a little bit with a grain of salt, but I think the concept still applies. But I'm assuming this is 6006. I'm just so familiar with that wax. If it is, one of the most common complaints, questions, concerns about this wax is that it's hard to wick and get a full melt pool, especially towards the top of the jar, and everyone thinks it's going to tunnel. The whole recommendation of a full melt pool, a quarter inch deep, all the way across, wall to wall the jar on the first burn, is just a guideline. It is not a hard, fast rule. In fact, it's sort of an outdated rule. It applied to waxes in the past that were really hard, and if you did not get a full melt pool, if you didn't let it burn long enough, it would just tunnel, and there was no catching up. Waxes these days are softer, and they will generally catch up. You don't necessarily need to get a full melt pool in the very first burn, because if you do, it's usually going to be too hot later in the jar. 6006 is somewhere in between both of those. It is not a rock hard wax with a high melt point, but it's also not a really super soft wax like a 464 or a ProBlend 600 or something, or a coconut wax. It is somewhere in the middle. So sometimes it looks like it's hard to get edge to edge on the jar, which is true. But if you try to force it and get that full melt pool on the first burn, you are certainly going to be overwicked the rest of the way down. It is perfectly normal. In fact, in my opinion, highly recommended that you get close to the edge, but not necessarily all the way. If you've got a tiny bit of hang up around the wall of the jar, no more than 1/8 of an inch. But if you've got a little bit, like it hasn't quite reached the edges a little bit, or it's just kind of soft, but not necessarily completely liquefied, that is perfectly normal for 6006. It doesn't get that hard, deep melt pool. It gets more of a slushy melt pool often. But anyways, it is perfectly normal. And that is exactly what all of these did. And I wanted to highlight that and show that in the videos that I've shown to this point, is you will see some of that ring around the outside where it looks like it's not reaching the edges. Guess what? It did, and it will reach the edges most of the time if you just keep going. After about the third or fourth burn, if it's not catching up at all and you're still seeing a lot of hang up on the wall, then you might be underwicked and you might need to wick up. Then again, if you leave a little bit of wax on the side, it's not the end of the world. That's a safer burning candle than one that is consuming 100% of the wax, too much heat in the glass. That's where you end up with cracked jars or, whatever. We can go on with a lot of different examples, but I would rather be cautious than too aggressive when it comes to dealing with an open flame in a jar. And in the case of 6006, it is perfectly normal. All of these had a little bit of a ring, a little bit left after the first burn, or a little bit after the second burn, but by the third burn, they were catching up totally fine. This is the other reason it's important to keep your wicks trimmed for customers, from a customer's perspective, because wicks curl a little bit, most of them do. And if you don't trim it and they keep curling, well, the wick just keeps leaning to that side that it's curling and the flame stays on that side. And that will cause an uneven melt pool. So one side of the jar will get a good melt pool and the other jar just continues to have wax buildup. If you trim the wick, so if this is the wick and it's, this is the curl, well, if you trim it, well, what's left is the part that's still straight up. And that will keep your burn profile a little bit more centered and give you a better, more even, consistent melt pool. So a couple tips there when you're using 6006. But the biggest tip is just to be patient. Definitely burn it about halfway down before you make a decision. I like to make full candles and test all the way through because the way a candle performs changes from the top to the bottom. And I want to know how my candles perform top to bottom. I think that is the way you make a good, proper candle that you can be confident about. If you only make half full testers and then your customers later complain about the way that it's tunneling or something's the way it's burning early on and you have no idea what they're talking about because that's not how you tested your candles. So I like to know my candles products in and out. Personal preference, but it is something I've always highly recommended. And in my opinion, it's worth that extra amount of wax to fill the jar the rest of the way and just be confident in your product. The only two that were a little bit closer calls to maybe not being enough wick was Sardinia Suntan and Toscana Olive Oil. Even though ironically, those are my two favorite ones. They burned great, but they had a little bit more hang up than the rest of them. And the olive one, it was starting to get a little bit more mushroom than some of the others. And it still had wax buildup. So you may try a different wick type, a wick series with that candle and see if you get any better results. Sunflower Sundress did not have any issues burning, but it got more of a mushroom than some of the others as well. I would say the one that burned the best from a flame profile was Field of Province and Sardinia Suntan. But then again, the other two, I actually like the fragrance better, so take that as you want. Anyways, they're all good candles. If you're looking for little tweaks, you may just flirt with one size up or down on a couple of them. And on the olive and sunflower, you may even try a different wick series and just see if you get something a little bit different. That's totally up to you because these are definitely sellable and good candles. No problems. All right, so now it is time to fact check myself. I said envelope earlier. A lot of the candle reviews I do are envelopes, but in this case, it was a card. And on the back, we have the answers. Now, remember we were supposed to guess wax, wax type, wick type, and then he wanted me to tell me what my favorite fragrance was, and he made a guess as what he thought my answer would be. As a review, I am dead set that these are 6006 candles, IGI 6006 Parasoi, and then the wick types, I'm not 100% sure. It looked like both HTP and CD wicks to me. I don't know. At this point, I've talked about them and looked at them so long, I'm just confusing myself. If we're dealing with two wicks, then I think we've got an HTP in a couple of them, maybe a CD in a couple of them. And if we're only dealing with one, then I don't know. I'd probably say HTP if I had to pick just one. As far as the sizes, my guess would be an HTP 73 up to a 93. And then CD probably a 7 to an 8, maybe a 9. So those would be my guesses. Let's go ahead and find out. All right, answers. Number one, the wax he uses is in fact IGI 6006. To be perfectly honest, I'm not too shocked. So yeah, number two, as far as the wicks, mainly uses HTP 73 wick in these jars, but Fields of Province actually is a CD7. Okay, so I was extremely close on that. Now, before you're like, all right, how the heck is he possibly guessing all of these? Well, check out some of my other reviews. Sometimes I'm right, just like in this case. Sometimes I'm not right, and I'm way out in left field. But to be perfectly honest, I'm just used to it. I've worked with so many different materials, both as a maker and a candle educator, candle making educator. So I've just got a lot of experience, hands-on experience with a lot of these, specifically with some of these materials. So that's why I was pretty confident with some of these guesses. However, I would have thought that if any of them was the CD1, I think I would have thought it was the Sunflower Sundress, not the Fields of Province. Now, I told you my favorite was probably the Toscana Olive View, followed closely by our Sardinia Suntan. I really liked the Sunflower one too, it just wasn't as strong for me. So let's see what he thinks I would have liked. He is a subscriber, he watches the channel. I've probably given some hints of some of my favorite fragrances, but like I said before, I like so many that at this point, it's just hard to tell. He says, out of the box, I'm going to say Toscana Olive View is my favorite, followed by Fields of Province. All right, so he was on both sides of the extreme there. He definitely got my favorite right. He must know I like bergamot, and he knows I like jasmine. So that'd be my assumption. That's why he figured I would like that. So definitely right on that as my favorite. However, he thought my second favorite would be Fields of Province, which is lavender and eucalyptus. This one's an interesting one for me, and I could see why he guessed that. I started off with a lot of my videos talking about how I've never liked lavender. And I've made jokes in a lot of my videos that lavender smells like kitty litter to me, or at least it used to. And so lavender used to be a fragrance I did not like at all. However, I have mentioned in videos since then that over time it's starting to grow on me and I'm actually starting to like it. However, starting to like it and it being a favorite of mine are still very far apart. So while I do like lavender now, it is definitely not my favorite. Yeah, but it is growing on me. It is growing on me. I'm going to keep saying that. But certainly the Toscana Olive View is my favorite. Honestly, though, I liked all of these. I really, really did. I want to say thank you again to Sean from Caravan Candle for sending your candles in. I appreciate it. If anyone else wants to do that, as a reminder, just let me know in the comments section. Sometimes I do get backed up with quite a stack and I kind of handle them as first come, first serve. So just coordinate with me and I'll let you know and I just fit them in. Just be patient with me. I appreciate you guys being patient and obviously for tuning into all these videos. I love having you here and I love doing these type of videos. Hopefully we learn a little bit from each other too. That's my favorite part about this is we get a chance to see other labels and other fragrances and other waxes, other designs, other inspirations. It's just really cool to share, encourage, and learn from one another. Check out a few other videos on the channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already. We do giveaways. We have a lot of fun, a lot of other content coming. I promise it's only going up from here. So thank you guys again, and I will see you next time. Thanks.